Well, good afternoon and welcome to Intuitive. Thank you for taking some time out of your day. We really appreciate the chance to talk to you. And today's topic is going to be Symantec workflow. And we're going to take a look at some processes and how we've been able to automate them. And specifically, I believe today's topic is around some software request and delivery. So we'll have a fun time getting through that, and we'll talk a little bit about our presenter in just a moment as well. But I wanted to take a moment and just introduce you to Intuitive. I can see from our attendees that some of you are long-term customers, and thank you for attending. And I see some new folks on there as well, and welcome to Intuitive. I appreciate you joining. My name is Mike, and I am the president of Intuitive Technology Group. And with me is Andrew Boone, who will be giving our presentation. Wanted to spend just a couple minutes talking about Intuitive. We're pretty proud of our company and the things that we have done and the things that we're doing, but one of the biggest things that happened with our company just in the last year is that we converted to an employee-owned company. And so that is a great opportunity for all the people on staff here, all of our consultants, all of our team have the chance to participate in ownership as our company continues to grow and thrive, that we can all take part in that. And Intuitive has actually been around for a while and has grown quite a bit already. We were founded in 2006, and so we're 12 years into this project, and at this point we're over 120 employees and across the entire United States. We've got a presence just about everywhere you could imagine, and we do business in even more states than where we have employees. As far as the things that we do, we break it down into three main areas that we provide our clients with coaching, we provide them with consulting, and we help them with staffing. In other words, we'll help you work on your projects and do them better. We'll help you perform the projects if you need a hand. And we're also willing to loan you folks or permanently place folks to help you build out your team as needed. We work with Lean Agile as one of our key methodologies, although we certainly coach on other things such as Kanban and Scrum and other good things. But we also have a very strong DevOps practice that grew out of our IT systems management practice. Along the way, we have also developed a huge portion of our business in various things around business intelligence, data warehousing, and other things that might be lumped in together as big data. So very proud of our company, very proud of the people on it. And with that, just to underscore a little bit more about that, again, we do a lot of staffing work, and you can see how we break that out. It's about 50-50 as far as the engineering versus the management topics. So as far as some of the things that we really get into with our DevOps practice, we've been doing a lot of cloud integrations for our clients who are either currently existing Altiris shops or Symantec customers, or other folks who have had a need to start migrating in part or in total into cloud environments, or to start integrating some of their cloud services into the way they do things. So we're very, very excited about that. We've got a long history in cybersecurity, and of course the business really started in the Altiris vein. So we've got a long history working with those solutions as well. As far as additional information, if you would like to consult our website, you can see a little bit of good information there about specifically the types of things we do as far as our consulting, as far as our staffing, some of the products that we support. As far as today's conversation, we are going to be focused on a specific subset of the Altiris product set known as workflow. And I'm sure that most of you on the call are aware that this is something that if you're a Symantec customer, you have access to it free of charge. So feel free to implement it in your environment, and you can certainly use it to perform all sorts of automation to your existing environment. Specifically to talk about that today, we have Andrew Boone. And Andrew's been with Intuitive for quite a while, and he's been in the industry for over 15 years. And he has been focused on a lot of areas of development, and certainly has an intimate knowledge of SQL and ITIL best practices. He's very familiar with a number of different help desk platforms, as well as the whole Altera stack of products as well. And that gives him the flexibility to work in a product like Workflow, where it allows you the ability to do a lot of drag and drop visualization of the tool, but then dive under the hood and do some additional integration work with other platforms to drive full automation. And he's done a lot of projects for us over the years. He's done things like automate patch management, so that a client can have their system automatically go out, discover newly available patches and catalogs, be able to stage those, create distribution policies, and then actually deliver them out through staging all the way through production, so that manual interaction is not required, and that you can put together your own exclusions and all those types of things. So he's done some really neat projects along those lines. He's done many projects where he's integrating with service desks of various vendors, including ServiceNow, including Symantec Service Desk, including a variety of others. Seem to all be escaping me right now. Sharewell being one of them, a handful more. And he's done these projects in all sorts of industries, ranging from retail to healthcare to education to government. So he certainly understands the different requirements that need to be observed as he does these types of integrations. And hopefully he'll have a chance to touch on that, as well as some of the other topics during his talk today. But with that, I'd like to, again, make sure that you get plenty of time with Andrew. I believe our plan for today is that he's going to be walking through an overview of a process that he has performed for a customer recently that we thought you'd get a big kick out of. And if you would be willing to send us questions and answers through the chat panel, I'll collect those. And at the end of the presentation, we'll plan on going through as many questions and answers as we have time for. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody one more time for your participation today, and turn things over to Andrew.
Thanks, Mike. Let me get shared out here. And to repeat what Mike said, I appreciate everyone's time today. I appreciate your interest in workflow. It's certainly my my forte, my skill set, my passion, I guess you'd say, for as much time as I spend in it. I like to think that you know, I spend a lot of time on detail, a lot of time on mentoring and things like that. So you know, let this be kind of I guess an elementary introduction to workflow in some cases. We'll dive into a bit of technical detail as well. There's not going to be any sort of deep dive demos or anything like that today. I think that's better served with one-on-one. So if anyone is interested after the fact in maybe talking through some processes you have that you'd like to maybe toss around for automation, or packing into a workflow project, let us know. We can certainly get on the phone with you, get on a screen share, take a look at the data points, and let you know what it's going to take and what that end result's going to look like for you as far as time and cost savings, and what automation can do for you. So that being said, let's move on here to our presentation. So I think Mike's already covered most of the introduction. I've been doing workflow for quite a while now, and prior to workflow I was doing Altiris administration, as well as Symantec endpoint protection. administration. And my work there kind of segued into what I help a lot of customers with now is, hey, we're doing these routine tasks on a daily basis that really seem like they should be able to correlate with data from one source to another source, and then make that happen in an automated fashion. And at the time, we didn't have a good relationship with the programming team and things like that, so it wasn't easy to go get a homegrown application or scripts and things like that for what we needed. And we had one of the Symantec guys come down and spend 2 days with us with the workflow project or product. He basically came in and said, I'm here for 2 days. What would you like to automate? And that's what I like to do as well with customers is, just basically say, what do you want to automate? And then we take a look, we talk about what that's going to look like, what it's going to take. And a lot of times we can get, it may not be pretty, but we'll get a working proof of concept for you, before that, small engagement is up, just to show the power of what workflow can do. So we've gone over who Intuitive is. We'll move on here and talk about what today's agenda is about. We're going to talk about what is Symantec workflow. I'll apologize in advance if anyone here is well acquainted with workflow. We'll try to move through the basics there swiftly. After that, we'll talk about translating business process into automation in workflow. Then we'll touch on some request automation. Request automation being from step A to step Z, all the way through if necessary. I've done request projects where we're starting from a completely blank slate. The only thing the customer has is a Visio diagram of what their process, their manual process is. They don't have a good service desk solution or ticketing solution, and we build the entire thing in workflow. And that will segue into what I've recently been doing a lot of work on, and that's integration between Altiris and ServiceNow as a ticketing platform with workflow sitting in the middle, playing liaison for the data transfer between the two. Okay, to start, what is Symantec workflow? So Mike touched a bit on this. Symantec workflow is it's basically a drag and drop development framework. It's going to look a lot like a kind of Visio platform. The difference being that those components that you see on the canvas actually are compiling code in the background at runtime. So you drop these components on the canvas, you feed them some data, you tell them what variables are going to be used per component, and then at runtime it compiles all that, and on the fly consumes all the data that has been either entered or fetched or in some way gleaned from environment variables, and then performs a task. Whatever task you need to perform, whatever task you can dream up or you want to try, workflow can typically handle that. If there's not a component that suits the needs of the process, there is a code wizard where we can provide our own custom code. So we can do .NET, C#, we can do some Java code as well. Another good thing about workflow is we have reusable models. So it's probably good to think of it like a function performs a task after being fed values for variables. So a function says, these are the variables I expect. Tell me what values to use. And that's what we're going to be doing in workflow. We're going to be using models over and over again in some cases. And what that does is it makes our processes very consistent and predictable, and also reusable. Another great thing I love about workflow is it's very self-documenting. So while you can just do the very minimum and expect the guy coming in after you to dig through your components and then figure out what you're doing, you can also annotate, you can rename components, you can keep track of what you're doing, what the components are doing, any caveats, any expectations on if this throws an exception, then this is what to expect, kind of thing. So it's very, very easy to document your process within the platform itself, and it makes it very easy for someone in the future coming in after you've published and you've handed this over. Someone can come in and very easily tell what you've done and make adjustments to that. Another thing I've been working a great deal on the past few years is improving the look and feel of the web forms that come out of workflow. So if you've used workflow on the call here today, you know that the form builder itself is a very, very simple, very basic form builder. You can throw some text fields on a form, throw some labels on there. You'll have Times New Roman type fonts. It's very basic. The good thing about workflow is that you can leverage HTML components, and you can just plop in your own scripts, your own customized HTML elements. You can include style sheets. So at runtime, all of this extra HTML and CSS code can be applied and make your front end look just as good as the back end is going to function. So it's great to have a really well-oiled machine, but it's nice also for that to look pretty flashy on the front end. So workflow does have very customizable HTML front end for use. Again, if you don't know HTML, you don't know CSS, it's not necessary. A lot of that style can be hard-coded inline right in the designer. Okay, another great thing about workflow is it does come out of the box with a great logging tool. So if an exception does occur while you're debugging a process, for example, it does show those errors in real time. You can monitor that. When you do run this in a debug session, you can see the arrow moving from one component to the next. And you can see in this screenshot here that's provided, you can see the illustration there of the exception occurring. So something went wrong with that token component, and we can see that happening in real time in our debugger. Whereas if we publish this out and in production, it may just end up on a generic error page, or maybe we want to present something to the end user in case an exception occurs that's a little more friendly for an end user to consume, other than a giant exception stack trace and things like that, which is what's of interest to the developers but not to the end user. So in debug mode, we can certainly review all those exceptions and make changes based on those outputs. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about business process translation, and what that's intended to convey is when I go in to a customer site, just like the illustration here, there's a lot of times where the customer is going to have just a whiteboard full of process information. I did a customer just a few weeks ago where that's how they did their design, was just on a whiteboard. They sent me a couple of photos of the whiteboard, and it's interesting. Sometimes you'll get a Visio document that's very basic, and the customer says, this is really all we have. Can you help us fill out the rest? And then sometimes you get a photo of a whiteboard that's just really extensive, really detailed. They know exactly what they want. They just don't know how to build it or what to build it in. So that's where we come in, and we take that business process that the customer's mapped out, or we come in and we consult and help them build that business process on a whiteboard, for example. And then we move that into a workflow framework and then test it along the way. That evolves over time into a nice front end that we can tie it into different disparate systems and really build out the dream of what they were able to put on a whiteboard, put on paper, but wasn't sure if we'd be able to realize that in the platform. Okay, as everyone knows, one of the toughest things about being in IT especially is, a lot of times we're doing these routine, mundane, daily repeatable tasks, whether that's on a spreadsheet, whether that's, filling out papers that another department requires. We can take all of that and we can translate that into workflow, what we call wireframe or framework. And we can eliminate the need for spreadsheets. We can eliminate the need for paperwork, for departmental forms. We can move all of that into a web front end and have that interact with systems like an Altair system, asset management, ticketing system like ServiceNow. And of course, the end goal of that is to remove that daily routine, that having to touch every single row or record of a spreadsheet, and free up those workers to do more customer-centric or maybe forward-thinking project work. Not only does it increase productivity, but it can save a tremendous amount of overhead, time, and costs when you've automated these processes that previously you're waiting on someone to fill out every row of a spreadsheet and copy from one to another. So Mike had mentioned earlier that we would talk a little bit about what we've done in the past. One of my favorites was a hardware refresh workflow project that I did a while ago. And basically the year before, the customer had what took about 3 months to do a scheduled hardware refresh. I think it was about 1,500 desktop computers, and it took those about 5 people, desktop people, about 3 months. They had to call, interact with the branches, order the equipment. They had to keep track of all of it, document where these assets were, make those changes in the asset management system. So we workflowed the entire thing. And what we found was that we not only didn't need 5 people, but we could also just hire an intern, a very low-cost intern, to sit in front of a computer, and this intern's going to be on rails in this workflow. All they have to do is click where it says click, make a few calls to the end user, and that's it. And that entire process, we got the same amount of turnaround as far as hardware goes, converted that from 3-month 5-person job into a 2-month 1-person job. So that's just kind of the value that we're able to express with workflow automation. A few others here: software distribution, whether that's being done by administrator, just a quick click, self-service. Mike had talked a bit about software request earlier, and we'll show a couple of screenshots of what those have looked like for previous customers. But self-service obviously is a big thing. We want to keep as few calls to the help desk as possible. Or it can be ticket-driven. So for example, if someone puts in a software request through an existing ticketing system or process, and we want maybe an automated action there to be, once that ticket reaches a certain status, we're going to go ahead and install the software. So there's a lot of opportunities for automation there, just depending on how the customer wants to play it, really. Patch management, Mike talked a bit about that. Recently built 100% automated hands-off patch management solution for a customer. And basically every day at noon or midnight, depending on if any patches have been either newly released, scheduled for progression to a new testing phase, or released to production, that information is going to go out. It's basically saying, hey, just so you know, these patches have been released. Nothing else you need to do. Here's the report of what's going on, what the compliance numbers look like. And the customer just looks at it, nods their heads, and then that's it. Don't have to get involved at all. We've done a lot of others around asset and licensing, things like that. A lot of cost savings there around asset management, and especially licensing, making sure that license compliance is in order. Workflow helps tremendously with things like that. And we talked a bit about why automate this at all. You've got a process that works, and a lot of times when we go in to start building automation, there's always one or two people in the room who think, I really don't want to do this. What we have right now works. It works. We know how to do it. We know the ins and outs. And the good thing about that is, maybe there are some quirks about the existing process. And if we have to, we can build those quirks into the new process as well. We can make sure that those are accommodated and it resembles as closely as it needs to be the original process. A lot of times we like to go in and consult and help build a more efficient process and try to push towards that. But workflows, it's open enough that we can do whatever the customer wants and whatever the customer needs. Okay, so we've got an illustration here on the right. This is a request. It was a really robust and complete request automation project I did a few years ago. There was hardware, software access request, move request, new user request. It was all built into the same thing. And this one in particular was from A to Z. We custom built everything in workflow. There was no ticketing tool. There was no service desk software that was being used. Workflow did all of it. So if you're unfamiliar with workflow and the product that was built on top of it, the Symantec Service Desk, I'll just talk really quickly about that, is that it has its own built-in ticketing system. It's process management. So even if you don't have a ticketing system that you use in-house or that you want to use, maybe you just want to stay out of it with this new process you're testing, we can build a ticketing system from scratch if we need. Okay, and then here's another that I did recently, and it relied very heavily on making sure that we had all the user information exactly right. And this was pulling from many different sources. We've got pulls from Active Directory, from PeopleSoft, from flat files. We're correlating that data with existing asset management user data. We're really pulling in all this information into workflow from, I think it was 6 or 7 different data sources. And we're compiling that in a relatable way and then pushing that over to, in this case, a ServiceNow ticket. And we'll talk a bit about ServiceNow in a moment and how we're going to integrate with that. But wanted to touch on, I guess, the possibilities there with request. Symantec has a new software request option in its own software out of the box, and workflow can be used to round that out. So if you want to build some complex approval workflows for that, workflow can tie into that. If you have a different request tool that you're using, depending on the exposed APIs, web services, whether there's any SQL data or code we can leverage, workflow can tie into that and automate that. So, all that's to say that, the ticket has a life cycle, and we want to move that as far as we can in an automated fashion as possible with as little touch as possible. And workflow is able to, liaison. In this case, we're going to talk about Altiris and ServiceNow very easily. And another one that we've had a bit of work with is BMC Remedy. And I think, Mike, that's probably the one you're thinking of. So at this point, we'll talk about ServiceNow just a bit and how we have managed to integrate successfully with that and bring a lot of customers in to workflow, the workflow fold, by showing the power of what we can do by automating a lot of what Altiris does and generating tickets without the need for going in. And that includes change management. A lot of places I go, the customers, I'll hear on internal phone calls, do we have to put in a change ticket for this? Is it necessary to do a change for this? It's our internal system. So a lot of what we've done is we've automated that, and you don't have your senior level technicians sitting at a desk at the end of the day doing paperwork for an hour. because all that's automated. ServiceNow is really good about exposing their web services and making that really easy to use from a workflow perspective. So workflow consumes that Altiris data, massages that to look however we need it to look, builds that into a payload that ServiceNow understands, and then ships that over. It can be incident change, it can be a custom process, security incident, really whatever has been built in the ServiceNow system we can leverage. So I'll talk a little bit about the latest one that I've done with ServiceNow integration was a patch management process. So basically, for any patch that goes out, we needed to address a change ticket for that. So what we've done then is we've created a workflow that not only handles that patch management process, but also prior to pushing out to production, it's going to create a change ticket, push that over to ServiceNow. In a separate instance, but what could be included in that, at this customer, they didn't want to do it. They wanted to do this part manually. But what we could have done there as well, that we've done for other customers, is included the functionality in ServiceNow for a single click to turn on that patch. So then, not only are we gathering the data automatically, we're pushing that over to a ticket automatically, but we can also give a one click right in the ticket that says, okay, this is approved, we're good to go. One click, and that enables the patch. And then, from then on, Altiris takes it from there and pushes it out. So out of the box, workflow provides a lot of Symantec integration components. Being a Symantec product, you would expect that. There are a lot there in the toolbox. What a lot of people working with the tool don't know is that if you make adjustments to this integration library, which supplies our Symantec components, you can get probably well over 1,000 additional components. And that's not even counting the ones that are automatically or dynamically generated from jobs that you create or tasks. So if a task is created on the Altiris side, we can rerun that generation library and have it pull in a new component for that task, specifically for that task. So we make a new task, such as maybe a software delivery task. We save that in the Altiris console, rerun our library, recompile it, and then it shows up right here as a component. Run task on machine or whatever. All we have to do is feed it a machine GUID that we've gleaned from the environment somewhere. Maybe someone's put in a computer name. We do a quick lookup, get the GUID, and send it over to this new component, runs a task on it. So what we see in the toolbox is not all we can do with Symantec. And then leveraging that same library generator, we have many different types of libraries that we can go through. So whether that's web services like we're looking at here, we can create custom data types. We can do table generators, tie in tremendously with SQL, and so on. So what we're looking at here is a ServiceNow web services integration. So basically all you do is enter the URL that's properly formed, of course. You give it a username and you give it a password that has access to web services on your ServiceNow instance. You hit go, and then you've got all these components that are dynamically created for you. And when these components are created, it builds out a list of everything on the other side of this. So the shape of the data, what fields are being exposed by this web service. And that's what's built in and populated into the components. When you drag the component out onto your workflow canvas, you double click and you look at the input, you're going to see all these fields. You can provide as few or as many as you want with, I think, 1 or 2 required fields. And then everything that you can glean from your workflow project, whether it's tying into asset management again, or some other maybe form-based input, we can take all that data and push it right over automatically into ServiceNow. So if we take another look at the URL here, you see we've got a /incident.do and then question mark and then parameters continue. But the important part is that incident.do. And what that's telling us is that we are interacting with the incident table in ServiceNow, and that's how we create an incident. If we were to, go in and make that change.do or some other custom process that's been created. The good thing about integrating with ServiceNow is it's very easy to change how we're interacting with that service. Just basically change the table name, give it any parameters that are required, and there you go, you've got your integration. Any changes that need to be made as well, workflow will pick up on that when you rerun the generator, recompile it. You don't have to go in and do any code. You don't have to go in and make any changes other than just mapping in the new data as needed. Okay, and then I'd mentioned, any pertinent data in the in the workflow we can pass over to the ticket. You can see kind of the mapping here on the right, whether we're mapping from existing data or whether we're giving it hard-coded values. We really want to free up the user from having to enter as much information as we can. So these are just some examples of some processes that we've used, and we've leveraged workflow in order to automatically create and move tickets over to ServiceNow. Server monitoring. So, server has an issue, some sort of critical issue. We can have a workflow watching that and grab all the info it can, push that right over to a ServiceNow ticket, and assign that to the proper group depending on what server it is, what applications on the server. We can take a look at all that and route it accordingly. Patch management events, we talked a bit about that. Asset interactions and changes. So if an asset changes location, we can create a ticket for that automatically. We can watch that data change in the database and then pick up on that trigger. Even Symantec endpoint protection events. So if we have some sort of outbreak that surpasses a threshold that's been set, we can automatically create a security incident for that. Send that over to ServiceNow, send that over to Remedy, send that over to wherever you've got workflow hooks into. Scheduled deployments, and so on. And then I've got an illustration here at the bottom of just a quick integration that I put together where we gave it a patch, we told it to install on a machine, and then there's the incident. So really we're able to push all that over without having to touch the console, the ServiceNow console at all. So now I've done a lot of talking. Again, if we want more technical deep dive or more specifics, please let us know, and we can certainly do a one-on-one call, find out what your challenges are, find out where you want to be with automation, or if you just want to talk pie in the sky kind of thing, what the possibilities are, the capabilities. I'll be happy to do that for you. Mike, at this time, I'll hand it over to you.
Sounds good. Thank you, Andrew. We do have a few questions, and one of them is actually related to what we've been covering so far, and that we're looking at patch management via workflow. And is this getting more common? What is the best way to do this? And so I think it may be worth just discussing a little bit about some of the ways you've gone through doing your patch automation with some of your clients. I know I can jump in with a couple examples as well, but do you want to talk about what aspects of patch management that you've typically automated, whether it's staging, whether it's, I think you've already mentioned some of the things like going out and checking for bulletins, but do you want to expand a bit?
Sure. Yeah, and if this is something that is of interest, then there's a lot of workflow projects that I build, and when you build this in a customer site, it's not exactly easy to pick that framework up and put it into a lab and have it work and then be able to show that. But this one is one that I have converted to a test lab. So if this is something that we want to review or take a look at, please let us know, we can set that up. But to talk a bit about it, basically the workflow is constantly looking for changes to the patch management database tables. It's looking to see if there's anything new that it hasn't picked up yet. When it finds one, it's going to collect as much data about it as possible. It's going to dump that all into a flat custom table so we're not querying the database too often. Altiris is already doing enough without us making calls for new patch data every 30 seconds. So we're going to pull in as much data as we can. We're going to form a nice organized tree in our patch management policies. So you'll have, it as organized as you'd like. You'll be able to very easily find it if you do want to go in and look at something, because the workflow is automatically building that tree structure in your policies. It builds, well, I guess I'll go in order. It's going to download that. If it encounters any errors downloading, it'll notify you. And it'll also mark that as being problematic, and it won't try again. It'll move on to the next. It'll stage that. And then in the cases that I've done recently, we go through testing phases. So it'll send it out to a test group that's been pre-configured in a filter. So it'll assign it to that filter. Keeps track of compliance along the way, and then sends out emails along the way. So really the entire thing is automated from start to finish. Hopefully I've answered that question, but Mike, if you want to expand on that, please.
Sure. Well, I know that one question related to it was about using some predefined scripts that they pulled from Symantec Connect for the group. If you search Symantec Connect for brace CWOC close brace, there are some tools that were written by a Symantec engineer over the past 5 or 10 years that they've leveraged. Would you typically embed those scripts right into a module, or would you call them, or how would you take advantage of some of that existing work that's out there?
I haven't used those tools previously. Everything I've done, I've built myself in workflow, but I am familiar with the tools. And I do have colleagues that have leveraged those in workflow. So I know that it is possible. And I know also right now, the gentleman who created those, I think, has kind of hung up his hat, so to speak, and has offered those, out to if anyone else wants to pick those up and keep up with development. So I'm not sure the state those are in right now.
Sure.
But the quick answer is we can either, leverage what's there, or we can reuse the code and probably refit it for the purposes of whatever process we come up with, or whatever the customer needs. So the guy has a lot of good code, a lot of good ideas that frankly a lot of us, myself and my colleagues, have come to leverage the ideas there. But it's certainly something that is considered and we can use.
Okay, great. Well, another follow-up to that is, what about the security implications? Can I have the workflow modules query a secret store for credentials on the fly, or do I need to embed those credentials into the components? And how do I keep track of that and make sure that I don't box myself into a corner?
So the tokens themselves, it encrypts those at the runtime. So really the weak point is where you're feeding the data into those components in order for them to then be encrypted by the component itself. That being said, we can pull that data from anywhere, whether it's stored in a project property right in the workflow, whether it's stored in a flat file, whether you've got it in a database in an encrypted field. We can decrypt that, feed the key in and all that, decrypt it, and then use that in the workflow. If the workflow itself has some security flaw, I assume Symantec would catch that and fix it. I haven't heard of anything. There's never been a problem with it. That would probably be a better question for Symantec as to whether that could be intercepted, somewhere between decryption of the value from a database, for example, and then the injection into the component. But again, as far as I know, it should be pretty solid as long as you've encrypted it in the database.
Okay, I've got an additional follow-up question. What sort of notifications will my process give me if it failed? How much notification is the right amount? I've spammed myself in the past, but I also need to get a sense of the health of my workflows that I create.
So what I've done, instead of sending emails, I would send an email, for example, if the system's down or if you've got some sort of catastrophic issue happening to where you need to get to it now. Otherwise, I typically write this out to a log, whether that's in a SQL table or a flat file. Just log a short line with all the information you need, and then just either have yourself sent a compiled version of that once a day, once a week, or just review that. But I mean, personally, when I'm doing development and ongoing maintenance of these sort of things, I like to have more information than I need. Just do quick searches for keywords that I know I should be expecting in a process like that when an exception occurs. So in my case, more is better. Just when I'm doing development, as an admin, I hear that a lot. We already get enough alerts. Don't really need more. So typically what I like to do is build in some extra, benefit into that. So for example, when I send the patch automation report, that's got a link right there to the compliance numbers. So a lot of times, the admins like getting those. They want to see where the compliance numbers are. They want to see, how that patch is doing. So maybe just give it a little extra, benefit rather than just, flat, hey, read through this read-only list of patches that have gone out, for example. Hopefully that answers that.
Sounds good. What about the whole thing with compliance numbers and creating one-offs? Have you had clients ask you to extrapolate out various tasks out of the notification server where you don't want to give the end user access to much, or perhaps out of a report being able to click run a security scan or run a package or whatever? Does that type of project come up, or is that something that you've had clients ask about?
Is this like around the security of the platform itself and keeping maybe junior level hands out of it, or is this?
That would be my guess with this one, is that they're looking for you to allow some folks access to console functionality without giving them an abbreviated console. So around limiting role and scope beyond what you can do with the console itself.
Yeah, I mean, if we're building a custom front end, we can build that, to suit. So if you only want to let someone change a location on an asset, for example, we build a form that has a drop down or a search field for location, and select the asset, select the location, submit, and those are the only components on the form. That'll tie into Altiris on the back end. Altiris, even being the back end, would be transparent to that user. All they know is they've got a form in front of them that maybe looks just like other intranet sites in the company. We've got all the themes and logos they've come to expect, with a couple of very easy to read and use fields, and then that's it. So yeah, I've done that many times.
Beautiful. So you also talked about compliance, and is that one of the big drivers that you've seen for people doing the workflows to increase, for example, their patch compliance, or increasing the asset reliability? Is what seems to be the driver behind a lot of these projects that ultimately frees up the funding to go forward and automate some things?
Well, really, the most recent one that I've done, where it was a complete automation of patch management, the intention there was to free up, the two employees who were doing patch management in, the 40,000 plus environment. Wanted to free them up so that they could do other things, like work on new projects for remediation, work on new projects for security compliance to improve those numbers. So what I'm doing is I'm building the automation to make sure they don't have to actually go out and do the work, and then also the view into the results of that and how things are looking. And from there, if they want to click on a compliance report, you can see the list of machines that are not within compliance. You can click on those and create a ticket. whether that's, in your service desk of choice. So that's typically the driver. Now, in the past as well, I have acted upon things like that where we build in remediation steps, leveraging, Go Solution Suite or, deployment solution, whatever vernacular we're using these days, or tasks in Altiris. So yeah, remediation is sometimes part of it. I haven't been doing a lot of remediation lately. It's more of, we want a view into what our compliance numbers look like. And we don't want these compliance numbers to be a result of the person who's doing patch hasn't been able to get to it yet.
Okay, well that makes sense, and that sounds great. I am coming towards the end of the questions that I have on this. I'd like to put one more call out to the group. Are there other topics that you'd like Andrew to touch on, or other questions that would help shine some light for projects you're working on now? And we'll give you guys just a minute or two to give us some last minute questions. Otherwise, with that,
I guess
I'd probably want. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just reiterate quickly. that the real value from workflow is going to be very evident once you start looking at the processes that are happening day to day. That doesn't have to be just in the IT department. It can be in any department. It can be anywhere in the organization. I was talking to a colleague the other day who did a nutrition workflow for calorie count and things like that for the cafe in the industry he was working in. So it can be anything. It doesn't matter what. We can automate it with workflow if it has some sort of data source. Or if it doesn't, we can automate it with user input and make it very easy for that end user to use. And the best way to visualize, or I guess think about how that applies to your situation, is to give us an email, give us a call, let us know your ideas, what you want to do, and let us talk through that and what that's going to look like if we were to put that into a workflow and automate that for you. And I'd mentioned before, a one-on-one is something, we'll certainly just jump on the phone with you if you got an idea, talk that through. We can set up, a mentoring or training if you're into workflow and hitting a wall and just not sure how to do it, can't find the resources. So anything Symantec workflow we can help with or get engaged with you with.
Well, that sounds great. And thank you again, Andrew, for giving us a really powerful presentation, bringing up a lot of great ideas of how you can use workflow, and hopefully queuing up some internal discussions for all the participants. And to you, the participants today, thank you for taking an hour out of your day to learn a little bit more about Intuitive and about Symantec workflow. Hopefully you found it to be of value, and we'll look forward to following up with you, and I'll wish you a good rest of your day.